Welcome to this chapter on Bourgogne. Yes, in the French Wine Society, we're talking about some of the finest wines in France. And I had to taste many of them to make an appropriate production for you. And I hope that my tasting of the wines didn't spill over too much onto this presentation, but I hope you can learn something from it. Now, we've studied so far in France two areas. Up in the northeast, we've studied the Alsace. And of course, this is where the German influence has come in, and we have a lot of beautiful white wines. A little bit further to the west, about an hour east of Paris, we have Champagne. And of course, this is the home to some of the most famous sparkling wines. And just south of Champagne is the area called Bourgogne. Now, these pronunciations I have are all the pronunciations that you get from the WSET Wine Society, and their pronunciation for Bourgogne is a bit hard to try to figure out. If you get on the internet, you'll see something like Bourgogne, which is a lot easier to follow. So this is what we're talking about today, Bourgogne. Bourgogne is in the northeastern part of France, about an hour and a half east of Paris, a little bit further south. And in Bourgogne, it's important to learn that there are 5 regions to Bourgogne. Now, I know that you're going to say, wait a minute, Bourgogne is a region. How can there be 5 regions in a region? Well, the French can do it. They don't worry about sub-regions or anything fancy like that. You can have regions within regions, and even some of the regions combined to be other regions, as we will see. So it's just best to accept it and learn. 5 regions to Bourgogne, from north to south. In the north, we have Chablis. As we move south, we have Côte de Nuits. As we move further south, we have Côte de Beaune. Then Côte Chalonnaise, and at the furthest southern tip, we have the Mâconnais. Now, I know very, very little about French pronunciation, but I did grow up right next to the state of Illinois, and I know that we don't say the S at the end of the words, but there is one exception. If the S is followed by an E, such as the masculine name Francois ends in an S, and we don't say it. We say Francois. The feminine name, exact same pronunciation, or same spelling, but has an E at the end, is pronounced Françoise. So, Francois, masculine, put the E at the end, Françoise, say that S, it becomes feminine. And here you can see Chablis, Nuits, Mâconnais, you don't say the S, but you put the E at the end, Chalonnaise, and the S gets pronounced. Okay? Just very, all I know about French. Okay. Let's learn these 5 regions. Say them with me. North to south. Chablis, Côte de Nuits, Côte de Beaune, Côte Chalonnaise, and Mâconnais. All right. Can you pick these out from a map of France? Suppose I gave you a street map of France. Could you find where Bourgogne is? Well, if you zoom in a little bit to the northeast, you find the city of Dijon, like the mustard. And south of the city of Dijon is the city of Lyon. And Bourgogne is pretty much between Dijon and Lyon. Actually, it's in the top 3/4 of that distance. So if I overlay it, I would see something like this. In the top 3/4 of the distance from Dijon to Lyon, I would have Côte de Nuits, Côte de Beaune, Côte Chalonnaise, and the Mâconnais. And then off to the side, I would have Chablis. So if I get rid of this, again, at the top I have Chablis, I have Côte de Nuit, I have Côte de Beaune, Côte Chalonnaise, and the Mâconnais. We're going to say this often enough that we're going to learn this. Now, if I gave you another map of France, not one without the streets, but more of a topographical map, could you find Bourgogne? Now, if we look at this map of France, the first thing that's very, very striking is in the northeastern corner of France, we can see what we learn is called the Rhine Graben. Graben, by the way, is the German word for grave, and I'm sure that some German geologist is what coined this term, Graben. And it is a large trench, like a mass grave, that is formed in the landscape, and in this case, the Rhine River runs through the center of this graben, and so it's called the Rhine Graben. And this is where the Alsace is located. Now, we're also told that Bourgogne lies in a graben. It lies in the Zone Graben. If we look at this map, what other grabens can we see? There's only one other that's fairly apparent, and it's sort of a little bit to the south and to the west, and that, of course, is the Zone Graben, and that's where we find Bourgogne. If we zoom into this graben, we zoom into this area, you will see at the very bottom of the screen, off to the right-hand side, the Rhone River. And the Rhone River runs in, and the Saône comes down and joins the Rhone. Where these two rivers join is the city of Lyon. We have one benchmark now for finding Bourgogne. If we go up the Saône River, you'll see a fork, which is another river coming into the Saône River. Not far from that fork is the town of Dijon. Once I have Dijon and Lyon, it's very easy to overlay Bourgogne, going from Dijon 3/4 of the way down to Lyon, and I can see that once again I have Chablis, Côte de Nuit, Côte de Beaune, Côte Chalonnaise, and Mâconnais. So the 5 regions of Bourgogne, very easy to spot on this map. Now, there's one more thing, that Côte de Nuit and Côte de Beaune are often combined and called one single area of Côte d'Or. Now, why do these two regions get called by a single name? Well, this is France. Côte d'Or means slope of gold. And it's not because these are expensive wines, and they are expensive wines that grow on this slope, that it's called slope of gold or golden slope. It's called golden slope because in the fall, all of the vineyards, the grapevines, the leaves turn golden yellow, and the hillside looks like this wonderful golden color. It has really nothing to do with the price of the wines, but everything to do with the color of the leaves in the fall. So Côte de Nuit and Côte Beaune are often combined and called Côte d'Or. And as I said, this is because Côte d'Or is golden slope. Now, why do we bother to learn these north to south? Well, let's look at the soils. If I pull up my map of Bourgogne, up in the northern part, I have the marly soils, right? Marl is the soil that's full of these limestone fossils of ancient sea creatures. Throughout the center of Bourgogne, it's much more of the limestone, the clay type soils that exist in most of France. And running south through this area is an area of granite and schist. Now, as I move from the north to the south in the vineyards, of Bourgogne, I moved from marly soils to more of clay limestone soils down to clay limestone granite schist soils. And the transitions aren't quite as smooth as what I show here in this picture. In fact, because of upheavals in the earth, because of, rivers cutting through, because of land washing out, the actual topography is much more of a mosaic opposed to this smooth transition. So it would be perhaps better if I would show these different areas of soils like this, where up in the north it's more green, it's more marly. Down in the southern part of Bourgogne, it's a little bit more blue, more purple, more granite, more schist, and in the middle more of this limestone type soils. And each of these little areas then make up a different kind of soil. And this is what really exists within this part of France. And these little areas of soil produce different tasting wines. So each of these little areas of soil are called a climat. And it's the ancient monks in the Middle Ages that defined what were the areas of a climat and where the wine tasted different when it was grown opposed to one area and the other area. Now, you may come up with the question of, what's the difference between a climat and a ludi? Because a ludi is a special area of soil or terroir. Well, in actuality, there is no difference, except climat, which has nothing to do with the word climate. Climat it comes from the Latin word, which means an area of land. A climat was defined by the monks. A ludi was defined hundreds of years later, after Napoleon, to basically describe the same thing. But of course, 500 years between these definitions, the lands are going to be, those borders are going to be slightly different. So you will find one climat that contains several ludis, and one ludi that claims several climats, because over the course of hundreds of years, they change slightly. But the Burgundians stick back with what the monks defined as climats, and that is what they prefer to use in defining what their wines are and what their wine tastes are. The other thing that comes out from the 5 regions north to south is the climate. Now, if we go back to Bourgogne, the overall climate is continental. And in fact, that's the correct answer to quizzes. What's the climate of Bourgogne? It's continental. But on the northern part of Bourgogne, there are influences of the maritime Atlantic climate, which is a colder climate. And in the southern part of Bourgogne, there are influences of the Mediterranean maritime climate, which is a warmer climate. So I have this climate of Bourgogne from north to south, and it's only 140 miles from north to south. Very short distance. Should be very different, very similar temperatures north to south. But because the north is influenced by the Atlantic, the south is influenced by the Mediterranean, I get a much bigger spread of temperatures than you would normally expect from a continental climate. And again, the climates don't change and merge smoothly like I show here, but instead the climates are influenced by the terrain, by the hills, by the valleys, by the rivers. And so perhaps a better picture is something like this, where it's a bit more blue at the top and a bit more red at the bottom and a bit more green in the middle, but the exact boundaries change. Now, these pictures help us to understand Bourgogne and to be able to answer questions about Bourgogne. Like, is the soils in Chablis or are the soils in the Mâconnais older? Well, obviously, in the Mâconnais, we have granite and schist. And that's much, much older soil than up in the Chablis, where we have these marls, which are limestone deposits of sea creatures. So one can pick this out from understanding this. You might say, where are the wines more acidic tasting? Where do they have more electricity? Where they have more bite? And of course, that would come from the cooler northern climates of Chablis, opposed to the more southern, warmer climates that are influenced by the Mediterranean down in the Mâconnais. The other thing we have from these 5 wine regions is what grapes are grown where. And in Bourgogne, there are 2 major grapes. The first major grape that's grown in Bourgogne is Chardonnay. And it is grown throughout Bourgogne, from the north to the south, from Chablis down to Mâconnais. You'll find Chardonnay growing in Chablis, and when it grows there and they make it into wine, they call it Chablis. Down in Côte d'Or, you'll find a Chardonnay grown, and the wine that they make is called Merceau. And then down further south, down in the Mâconnais, you'll find Chardonnay wine that's grown, that's called Pouilly-Fuissé. Now, why in the world do these crazy French not call it Chardonnay? Because it's the same grape that grows up in Chablis as it is that grows down the Mâconnais. And it's Chardonnay. So why don't they call it that? Well, the reason they don't call it that is because the grape is influenced by the terroir. It is influenced by the soil and the climate. And so those grapes that grow up in the north, in Chablis, don't make a wine that tastes like the wine that's made in the south, in the Mâconnais, or in the middle, in Merceau. So Chablis is an electric, flinty, stealing, acidic wine with little oak. Down Pouilly-Fuissé, down in the south, it's a smoky mixture of yellow fruit with more exotic spices and nuts. These are not the same taste. These are different. So the French prefer to call them by different names, which we do all the time with other things, such as ground beef. If you make ground beef into a spaghetti sauce, you don't expect it to taste like ground beef that's in Sloppy Joe's or ground beef that's in a taco, because they come out with different taste. So we don't call tacos marinara sauce, because the taste is different. The French follow this with the wines and say that the white wine from Chablis doesn't taste like the white wine from the Mâconnais, therefore it should be called by a different name, even though it's made from the same grape. It tastes very, very different. Now, in addition to Chardonnay, the other major grape of Bourgogne is Pinot Noir. Now, Pinot Noir is a finicky grape. It doesn't like if it's too hot. It doesn't like it if it's too cold. It likes it if it's just right. And down in the south, in the Mâconnais, because of the Mediterranean influence, it's just too hot. And up in the north, where Chablis is, because of the maritime influences of the Atlantic, it's just too cold. So you will find the Pinot Noir growing very much in the middle, in the Côte d'Or, and a little bit down in Côte Chalonnaise. In fact, if you looked at the percentages, Chablis is 100% white. We get down to Mâconnais, 85% white, but in the middle, we see more and more red wines. Côte de Nuit is only 11% white, 89% red wines. Côte de Beaune, 43% white, 67% or 57% red wines. So the Pinot Noir sits where it's not too hot, not too cold, right in the middle. I hope you enjoyed this. Nice introduction to it. There's much more to learn about Bourgogne and have fun exploring. Bye-bye.